Thank you. Thank you, Robert, and thank you so much, Harry, for inviting me, and thank you for the patience you had for despite my travels and my obligations to find a day to be here. I'm very happy and very honored to have a chance to present you. Actually, my last research or my last book, I just finished a book on this topics this summer. And you're not the very first because I presented the stuff three weeks ago at Princeton, but almost the first people. So please also be cruel with what I'm talking about because I need critiques and improvement. So just in order to contextualize this kind of topic, I published some years ago, I don't remember, 3-4 years ago, a book about housing and domestic space from a philosophical architectural point of view. And I realized that I spoke about life in general and the space, but I didn't speak about what is happening in house, which is love and family. So I decided to write a book on love and family, also because as I try to show those two institutions' feelings have changed a lot. So and let's start from this change. So between the late 80s and the early 2000s, an interesting metamorphosis affected one of the most creative sources of contemporary mythology, the television series film industry. So the previous decades had been dominated by production that sought to portray family life in all its breadth and contradictions in a bittersweet way. So Little House in the Prairies, Different Strokes, the Crosby Shows, Family Ties, 8 is Enough, Happy Days, and even the Adam Family. I probably don't know those series. It's like the kind of series I grew up with. But they were faithful reflections of reality, but also a kind of sophisticated normative representation that sought to change the common mindset of the audience and offer new models of existence to a large segment of the population. This is why the arrival of that shows such Friends, the Seinfeld, and later the Big Bang Theory was so significant, and I suppose this is more familiar to you. So in these works, it's possible to see, in my opinion, real transformation in the sense that Lévi-Strauss gave to this term. At the center of these long stories, there is always a home, a community that lives so intensively together that it can be defined as a family. But these families are no longer bound or defined by real, genealogical ties, at least not in the traditional sense of the term. They are the members of these families are friends, as the title of the most famous and successful series of this new genre announces. Of course, the plot involves more intense erotic relationship developing between, for instance, Rachel, Monica, Ross, Joey, Phoebe, Chandler, and so on. But the house seems to define a higher and deeper unity, which is both inside and outside the traditional romantic relationship. And this bond of friendship, sanctioned by the sharing of a common space, is indifferent to genealogy. Children may arrive at a certain point, and if you remember, it happens in the Big Bang Theory. At the end, two couples have children. No, the three, because but it's not important now to spoiler also the series. But their presence in no way changes the dynamics and center of gravity of the family friendship that inhabits and shapes the home. I would like to dwell on this image, on this kind of new houses, and invite you to take a closer look at those houses and these sets, not to take them as an example from a construction point of view, or because they are ugly normally, or to copy their design, but to recognize in them the foreshadowing, even if it's grotesque and embryonic, of a profound anthropological mutation that has just begun, that marks a definitive and radical transformation of our way of life and of your profession as future architects. It's a new configuration that I propose to call modern love. I mean love not as a simply simple passion or feeling, but as an institution capable of giving form, substance, and solidity to a society. So I'm talking about the moral and legal transformation of a category that has been completely neglected by the social sciences and philosophy of the last century, the family. So I'm really prefer to speak about family, not just love, and to speak of family in a way is love not just as a feeling, as a sentiment, as a kind of affection, but as an institution which is recognized by the rest of the society and which is changing or which is structuring and shaping society, even from, for instance, an economic point of view, because family is the base, for instance, of heritage and so on. So with the formula of modern love, I would like to condense 3 ideas that I would like to propose you today. So the first is that love has changed radically and unexpectedly beyond any predictable form and in stark discontinuity, not only with the European cultural past, but with the past of all other cultures known to us. So it's like something happening, but we cannot like read these new forms of new way of life through the instruments, cultural tools we have or we have inherited. The second is that because of this change, architecture will have to radically rethink the way it conceives the relationship between home and city, between housing and civic architecture, as well as that between public and private. That's why it's important, I think, to speak with you about this topic. And the third is that this change is epochal and anthropological in nature, and it's a form of radicalization of the project of planetary modernity, and not its abandonment or overcoming. And in order to make immediately clear why it's necessary to observe the changes in our way of loving, we need to start by this third aspect, by the idea that this transformation is a radicalization of the modern project. Now, contrary to what has long been believed, love is not a marginal and secondary element of our culture and our modern culture. It's instead the pillar of what we have called modernity. It was the Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor who proposed this, recognizing, contrary to the proposals of sociologists like Weber or Giddens or Beck or philosophers such as Habermas, that modernity is not exclusively the result of technological development or of the European conquest of other continents or the transformation of social or political order. At the heart of modernity, there is a revolutionary moral project that has brought everyday life, so the common life, the ordinary and mundane kind of features, family and work and labor, to the center of the political and economical, social and material consensus of our society. So the idea, in order to be clear, I don't know if it's clear, it's that modernity is not it's not a consequence of the Industrial Revolution or the technological development of our society. It's not. It's neither the consequence of the geopolitical changes linked to the conquest of the American continent by European. It's actually the consequence of a very specific modern moral project that put at the very center of our preoccupations, of our imaginations, of our political projects, what we can call the common life. The common life in the sense the ordinary life, the life of everybody. And in the sense, for instance, this is immediately clear when you are looking at the history of novels, of literature. When you're looking at, I don't know, in ancient Greece or in Rome, literature, the novels usually talk about like heroes or emperors, big human beings, big men actually, not even female. And novels in the sense of what is happening with the Tristram Shandy, or think of Mrs. Dalloway. What is Mrs. Dalloway? Is the kind of account of what is happening in the mind of a totally ordinary woman, and nothing is really happening. It's not the kind of the chronicle of a lot of important events or important acts made by an heroic figure. It's like just woman who is like passing through London, and she's like thinking of some things, and this is possible. The fact that suddenly we are spending hours reading the report of what is happening in the mind of someone who doesn't count anything in society and will never be, reminded for her like gestures or. This is exactly what Charles Taylor means by the idea. Modernity is that suddenly common life is the space where you're supposed to find moral perfection and freedom. And that's why it's open to everybody and not just to some, for instance, one gender or some race or some nations and some people. But more precisely, the idea of Taylor is that this common life, this ordinary life, where you are supposed to find your moral perfection, your kind of and your freedom, is based on two main pillars, which are labor and family. That's why, and even in this space, in this respect, you can see the difference between antiquity and modernity. Because, for instance, in antiquity, at least in Europe, if you look at ancient Greece and Rome, work was not even present in as a moral aspect of your life. First of all, because work was the job of slaves and not of free human beings, and because the idea was that work is always the space of necessity, and you cannot find any kind of freedom in this attempt to, in a way, not only just survive, but reproduce, put some value within the matter. And what modernity did is to say, no, labor and family, and family was the same, family was the space where, the family was dictated by patrimonial necessity. You were obliged to marry this person or those person just because of necessity of putting together like patrimony or heritage or money, wealth. And the idea of modernity is that no, within labor and within family, you are obliged to find your own perfection, moral perfection, and your own freedom. And it can sound as a very abstract idea, but it is not. Think of whenever you are meeting someone, here in Paris, in UK, in US, the first information you want to get is what this person is doing in terms of job or a future job, and who this person is loving in terms of, for instance, gender orientation and so on. Why? Because that's the point. Because you think that in the answer that this person will give to these two questions, you can find the most idiosyncratic and the most personal expression of the freedom and of the personality of this person. Now, this idea, which is for us evident and trivial, is actually something that didn't exist in the past and that no other culture, nor in the past, nor contemporary, before modernity, was able to invent. And this is for Charles Taylor what modernity is. It's an amazing idea, very smart idea, very clever, but also it's really, from this idea, of course, or from this project, everything can be in a way drawn in terms of everything else, even the importance of economy is in a way drawn by this insight or by this goal. Sorry, I abandoned the text because I was enthusiastic about this idea. I love this kind of reading of modernity. We try to find back the... but actually, but in a way, but the problem that Taylor didn't anyway discuss, not because he didn't see the problem, but because it was not the object. It was in this book that was published in 1989, that he delivered this kind of reading of modernity. But what he didn't discuss was that actually those two pillars, those two aspects of modernity, of common life, were not developed in the same balance. We are a society, we in the sense modern Western societies, I'm simplifying of course, but please, it's for the sake of the argument. There was an overdevelopment of one aspect, so the work, labor, economy, and an underdevelopment of the other aspect, love, family. So in a way we have, even from a scientific point of view, there is a science of production of the love, of production of freedom and perfection through labor, which is economy, but there is no real science about how can we produce wealth and goodness and whatever through love. It's something which is neglected or in a way segregated in like very strange magazines or kind of television formats. So we from a certain point of view, that's for this reason, modernity has always been incomplete, interrupted, or rather it has never taken place. Because of our inability to reform families, we have never been modern. That's the point. That's one of the first points. Sorry, I forget. This is what one of the first points I want to make. And this divide or this imbalance, it's also your responsibility in the terms of the responsibility of architects, because the home, the domestic space, is in reality the symptom and the fruit of this betrayal of the modern project, for which architecture is also responsible. So the break between the erotic and the economic orders and the subordination of the former to the latter. When the city, at the dawn of modernity, claimed the capacity and exclusivity to produce wealth, and for this reason alone was able to impose political equality among all its members, it left behind the domestic space as a sort of black hole of design and imagination. This is meaning, what I mean is like, in a way, modernity is also the moment where, because in the past, wealth was produced in the domestic space. It was not what we call in modern times political economy, because wealth was owned and transmitted within families, so it was a totally private business. What happened with modernity is that the state started to focus on the production of wealth, which means literally that now it's the city, not the house, which is producing wealth. And that's why cities explode in modernity. But this, and that's why, in a way, cities have stolen the wealth to the houses or to domestic space. But this kind of phenomenon left behind the domestic space as sort of a black hole. This is why, if you compare, this is one of the reasons, not just the only reason, but if we compare the intellectual and creative effort of architecture of the last centuries on urban and domestic space, we are left, I am left at least speechless. I had a very interesting discussion with Beatrice Colomina about that in Princeton. We speak about that. We can speak about that in the Q&A session. So if our apartments are machines, they are ancestral, folkloric, archaeological, obsolete machines that have rejected modernity beyond their doors, not for economic but for moral reason. Some architects, and I'm thinking of Leroux, Eisenman, there was of course a development of some kind of or in some aspects even Rem Koolhaas, some experimental housing projects. But these projects were always formal experiments. They were about like architecture in itself and not about, in a way, what is happening in the house. If you're thinking of the houses of Eisenman or even the house of Koolhaas, or even Le Corbusier, it was what was about. It was how do we think architecture in itself, and not how can we reform family. The architecture of the last century was neither modern nor postmodern. It betrayed and made modernity impossible. We have allowed love and erotic relationship to remain the supreme form of patriarchy and gender domination, and the home is the proof that modernity has always been incomplete, obtuse, and schizophrenic. Yet the world is changing, so I'm not here to denounce people and make critique. This is, this would be lazy. I'm here to say, hey, the things are changing. So the world is changing, the things are changing, and the best place to begin observing and describing the change I'm talking about is to look at the invention, and I'm emphasizing the word invention, of the new same-sex marriage contract that has taken place over the last 30 years in many places. So I will refer for convenience to the French law, to the French case, first of all because we are in France, but also because it's not the first case of modern legislation. It happened already. In France, the recognition came, as you probably know, in May 2013. It was not the first time that some legislation recognized the same-sex marriage, because it happened already, in Netherlands in 2001, in Belgium in 2003, in Spain, and in some states of the United States. But the French case is interesting also for a symbolic reason, because, as you probably know, France was the nation that invented the idea of modern code of law. So that's why it happened here with a certain also delay. The law, so the invention of the law responded, sorry, no, some slides have fallen, I don't know what, but so the law was, the necessity of the law responded to the need of open up the institution of marriage to same-sex love, but the logic that made possible the transformation is actually much less gender-related than one might suppose. So one of the starting points was the ruling by the European Court of Human Rights on July 11, 2002. It was the case Christine Goodwin against the United Kingdom. And the point, and this sentence had already indicated, and the case was a British transgender citizen who sued the country for sexual discrimination by the administration, and accused UK of violating Article 12 of the European Convention of Human Rights for preventing her from marrying. And in the final text of the ruling, the court said something which is interesting, which is I'm quoting the sentence, that the ruling, that inability of any couple to conceive or parent a child cannot be regarded as per se removing the right to enjoy marriage. End of the quote. So the decisive problem was less the issues was not so much the gender of the spouse as the essential link between marriage and genealogy, which was reaffirmed as in the Western jurisprudence for millennia. As a French jurist wrote in the most authoritative academic handbooks on civil law, I'm quoting him, when marriage is opened up to people of the same sex, it becomes detached from kinship. It's before no longer founding of genealogy. It's something which is a pure form of social recognition of the family, of an individual. So, and this is actually an important point. So what I try to explain is that the invention of this institution, first of all, the difficulty from a legal point of view was not the gender of the partners, was to detach family and genealogy. That was the point. And because of that, it took a little bit of time, and because of that, the majority of there was such a huge kind of opposition. But it was exactly this point also at the center of the claim of the familiar institution. Perhaps it's better that I'm just speaking, it's easier for you. And this is also the reason or the main issue of the huge amount of thinking and also protest and activism that started in the Bay Area in the late 80s, and it is reported by this amazing book. This was a very important book in anthropological literature, that's Okay, Western Families We Chose. This book, in a way, traced back the emergence of this term, chosen family, which is now totally normal. It's like extremely used, but it apparently came out in this region and in the late 80s. And it's important to understand what is the origin of this term for two reasons. First of all, because it marked a huge revolution in the LGBT culture, in the sense that in the past, the idea of being a lesbian, gay, or whatever was the sort of was associated with the claim of being outside any form of family or kinship related institution. And at a certain point, there was a shift where LGBT communities, especially in this area, started to say, no, we do not have to reject family. We do have to queerize or to make family queer. That's why the claim of the recognition of the same gender marriage started, and the idea of taking the term of chosen family was to, in a way, to stress this point that the family, the queer family or the same-sex family, should have been a family where the kinship is no more based on genealogy, because of course the main obstacle is exactly that, especially for a homosexual couple. Is it clear at this point? But it would be at the same time both incorrect and naive to think that this mutual separation I'm speaking about, so this divorce between family and genealogy, is just linked to the claim of gender minorities. It's a broader phenomenon. The recent transformation of family institution is actually also the consequence, for instance, between the separation, the consequence of the separation between sexuality and reproduction, which was politically driven by feminist movement through the struggle over contraception and abortion, and also, I mean, what produced this divorce was also the ruling about divorce. I don't know if you ever reflected about that, but divorce introduced almost already 50 years ago the fact that you have now two generations of people for which to belong to a family, to be a son or daughter, or to have like some parents, is not the same. So we have children who simultaneously belong to more than one family. So already through divorce, the tie between family and genealogy were weakened. And it's clear when you're also reading the discussion about the introduction of divorce, for instance, in France in the 18th century, just after the Revolution, when the parliament should talk about why should we or not introduce divorce. The main problem was, but then genealogy and family got separated. And it's interesting also to see that in the kind of legal literature, the point is really always there for instance, in one sentence of the Belgian, in one opinion for the preparation of the law in Belgium in 2002, one of the legislators said actually that it makes no sense to be against this kind of ruling, because people already marry other people, not because of procreation. So the kind of customs of even heterosexual is already going in this direction. Why I'm talking about, and it's also interesting to think that this idea of separating family and genealogy is a sort of legal translation of the very famous adage uttered by Donna Haraway, making not children. You could say that now what is happening is that we are making family and not children. So the consequence of this legal change could be enormous. One of the first and most immediate is the fact that once the family is no more subordinated to reproductive work, to reproduction, there is no longer any legal or any moral reason to limit the number of the partners of two. If the point is no more like making children, then why just two persons should be married? We could, for instance, marry together all, I don't know, we are 20, so and it would be fine. And it's not science fiction, it's already happening. For instance, there is a recent ruling by the City Council of Somerville in Massachusetts, so just near Boston, which recognized that the legal union of three persons living together, and it's already like something moving in this direction. And it's not what I'm talking about. It's not necessarily, or it's not really polyamory, because it's not a simultaneous multiplication of a dyadic experience or a form of amorous anarchy. It's the extension of the family contract to more people bound by the same rights and duties as traditional husband and wife. And once again, it's important to remember that we are talking about institutions and not emotions, because it's only when a feeling is embodied in an institution that it acquires the power to give lasting and objective form to a particular society. And there is, and the second consequence of this new form of the legal institution of family is that, exactly like in the television series I was speaking about, any distinction and opposition between friendship and erotic or sexuality would become meaningless, however, being doomed to disappear. It's not that sex is disappearing. It's just that sex is not the criterion in order to define family. It's indifferent if you are do or not doing sex, because the ratio of the union is no more reproduction. And it's not so much, or not only, the end of monogamy, but the reduction to irrelevance to any dialectic between monogamy and polygamy, which is also another reason why in my opinion, for instance, reflection of polyamory risks being on the side of reaction rather than progress. So family in this sense would become the space of loving friendship, or of the impossibility of distinguishing and cataloging the forms of eros. But the most important consequence, however, is that the family name, imagine if people are marrying, and 3, 4, 5 people are marrying, the family name could no longer be a genealogical index in any way, either patrilinear nor matrilinear. So if we are marrying, it's no more possible to tie to express to this symbol the fact that we are like the heirs of someone, either father or mother. We have to invent a family name, which is just a sort of the expression of the fact that we are sharing a common project of happiness. Could be, I don't know, Perrier or whatever, Hello Kitty, but it should just say that. The family name becomes sort of kind of sentimental nickname, which expresses this kind of mystical kinship among different people. Precisely because it's outside the genealogical experience, both matrilinear and patrilinear, the new family name would afford to find a simultaneous overcoming of patriarchy and matriarchy. and of any vain illusion that it's enough to change gender in the genealogical domain to improve the situation of a family. A solid and consistent philosophical tradition has long invoked the idea that the realm of the mothers, to use the famous expression by Goethe, is more capable of producing justice from the unchallenged dominance of fathers in the domestic spheres of the last millennia. Yet this view is, in my opinion, naive and dangerous. It's true that love, or rather the family, as we have talked about and experienced it, has been a horror in recent centuries. Indeed, clearly the most atrocious of horror. You don't have to be a feminist or an LGBTQ activist to recognize this. Love has been the place and the instrument of the most atrocious and perverse domination in human history. Because it's because of love that gender have been divided, and it's above all because of love that one gender has dominated all others, preventing them from accessing the most fundamental forms of freedom. So the idea is that patriarchy was built through love relationship and not against them. Eros has been, over the last 5 centuries, the greatest slave driver, the most heinous rapist of human life. And in the face of this horror, we cannot claim, or nobody can claim, any moral and cognitive superiority and to claim of the victims. Actually, in every form of experience of evil, the victims are free from blame, of course, but they do not acquire any moral knowledge or any form of holiness. This is why these horrors are a tragedy. They saved no one. To say otherwise is dangerous because it would mean affirming the necessity of the tragedy in order to produce this moral knowledge. I don't know if it's clear, but we will speak about that perhaps later. And perhaps for this reason, it no longer makes sense to theorize about gender without developing a theory of love. So gender is not gender is not an independent determination of identity and has nothing cognitively or morally autonomous with respect to the experience of love. It's only the path, the consciousness, and the practice that allow each person to make the experience of love possible. Gender is always an accident and a determination, often ephemeral and contextual, of the world in which we love, and not a way of contracting identity. It only defines in each individual the finite combination that allows us to love. So genders are the consequence of love, not their cause. And if it's Eros who divided the genders and set them at war with each other, it's Eros who will have to solve them. So the idea is that we have to overcome also the gender theory and develop a new love theory, because it's just through that we can, in a way, redefine this common life Taylor was speaking about. And faced with modern love, all genders today are absolute beginners in the same situation of ignorance and perplexity. Each of them can only say what David Bowie entrusted to the speaking self in one of his most beautiful works. I'm quoting him: "I have nothing much to offer, there is nothing much to take. I'm an absolute beginner, but I'm absolute sane. As long as we are together, the rest can go to hell." End of quote. There is no tradition, no cognitive capital, and to put it in a joke, there are no experts or scientists in love, only amateurs. So ultimately, there is precisely what Bowie theorizes. Modern love is a relationship that differs from the contemporary economy. This idea should be taken literally. We often forget that in Greco-Roman antiquity, family and economy were two synonyms. The Latin familia comes from famulus, which means slave, because it used to be an economic and entrepreneurial unit in which the economic production of value was linked to the reproduction of life, and therefore the need to transmit the value produced. So in ethnographic tradition dating back to Lewis Morgan, which was enthusiastically welcomed by Marx and Engels, but has unfortunately been completely forgotten in the contemporary debate on gender inequality. It showed that patriarchy does not arise from consideration about the nature of men and women, but from the need to ensure the linear transmission of accumulated wealth, which is the wealth produced by the domestic space, by the family. If it is this necessity that has created both the division of labor and the inequality of roles and powers between the sexes. In the words of Engels, I'm quoting him, the inequality of rights between the spouses, which we have inherited from early social conditions, is not the cause but the effect of the economic oppression of women. End of quote. So there is no original ontology at the original family, only a precise economic eroticism. And the problem is not the family as such, but the fact that the family has been based on genealogy. I don't know if it's clear at this point. So one of the most interesting aspects of the anthropological reflection, which has been taken up by let's say Marx, Engels, and this tradition, is the idea that what has been called patriarchy afterward was not caused because of something happening between the female, the woman and the man within their relationship. It was what happened within them and their children. That's why that is what at stakes in patriarchy. It's because at that point, once you produce the division of labor, in that case for like almost for the fact that reproduction was a very dangerous kind of issue. But once you produce this division of labor, the father wanted to know who is getting the wealth produced in the family, and that's why there is the production of both of the imbalance of the genders and of the fact that the family is linked on the genealogical bond. And that's why the problem was not the family in itself, is the fact that the family was in a way thought and structured around genealogy. So that's why it's important to understand this point. And once you, I'm just cutting a little bit, but once you are cutting the link between family and genealogy, then everything changes. And the change is like not just a little change, it's like a huge transformation of kind of economic and symbolic structure of society. So this change, once you start to recognize that family is defined by genealogy, what is changing is not just, as I said, like probably the symbolic kind of tools we are defining ourselves. Probably what is changing in this case is also the rules of inheritance, because imagine we are marrying to each other, then of course the inheritance cannot be anymore purely genealogical, because otherwise you have too much concentration of capital on in one single family. But what is more interesting is the fact that this transformation would in a way trigger sort of the end of the distinction between the public and the private. But this the end of the distinction between the end of the distinction between the public and the private is something perhaps which has already started. There is a very interesting philosopher here in Paris who is teaching in my university, whose name is Michel Espano, who already showed that actually this opposition between private and public is also from a legal point of view an illusion, because what we call public law is an aspect of private law. But beyond that, what is happening, I think, it's that in our time we have stopped to consider private and public as two different substances, as two realms which have like different matters, different logics, different ontology. And we are not considering the public, so the state or the square, as something which is opposed to the private. We are considering the public, the common, as a sort of friction which is produced, or as something which is produced by the friction of the individuals. I give you an example, which is stupid, but it's very easy to understand. Think of Airbnb. I mean, you can think of this kind of app, whatever you want, but if you look at Airbnb look at Airbnb as if you were like an anthropologist of the 24th century, which is coming on Earth and is looking at this kind of structure as a symbolic form. Airbnb is the evidence, is the sensitive evidence of the impossibility to distinguish the public and the private, because Airbnb is showing you that there is no formal material distinction between an apartment and an hotel, or an apartment and a square, the public square. So this is exactly what is happening, and all the platform economy is actually going in this direction. Is in a way the production of the common through the private itself. So the common doesn't mean the production of the common doesn't mean to overcome the public, the individual or the singular. But this is also actually the kind of message that we receive, or the kind of structure that defines all the digital apps. Think of what happened through WhatsApp. So first of all, it's important to realize that, unlike what has been said, so in a way those devices are not in a way produced following the matrix of public space. Those devices, everything which is in those devices, are extension of the domestic space in a way. And that's why, for instance, by the way, it's a crime that you architects left those objects actually to computer scientists, because this is something you should have like designed, and not computer scientists, because this is like just an annex to our homes. What is WhatsApp is a corridor that allows you to get in touch, to speak, and to be together with people which are like living on the other ocean or on the other part of the world, on the other side of the ocean, but bypassing the city. So this is something which allows you to be constantly at home without, in a way, having to. It's like, because of that, I'm at home, like in Kyoto, in Paris, in Dakar, because I'm constantly in contact with my cherished or my beloved persons. And why it's important for you? First of all, because of what I said. So they are structuring a totally different idea of what is the private and what is the public space, and they are structuring those spaces beyond the opposition that we're normally accustomed to. So that's why, for instance, the distance between housing and city is like shrinking. But it's important to understand those devices, the architectural devices, also because of that, the idea of house has changed. So the house is no more something which is, because of that, which is linked to land, territory, geography. Because of that, now the house is something which is following your body, moving everywhere. So that's why I wrote that WhatsApp is the new model, or actually you should think of a house as something which is no more linked to the ground necessarily, and therefore as something whose main kind matter is not space anymore. So the house is the like set of loving relationship that everybody is like having with a lot of persons, not necessarily concentrated. That's why the idea of house, for instance, should more and more resemble to a sprawl, to a sort of diffused set of elements and not as like the collection of 4 walls and the roof. I'm just cutting because so that we have time. So the idea is that because of those because of these elements, you should actually rethinking domestic topology. Those two elements. So on the one side, what I described as the revolution of family, and on the other side, what happened on the technological level, which to me are going together. But this is like the evidence of the emergence of a new topology, which is the description of which, or the design of which, is the most urgent task of architecture today, I think. If you want to remain modern, the new widespread large family home, a sort of domestic sprawl or radiant home, is still difficult to conceive and even more difficult to design. But ultimately, we live in a world where the home and the family is multiple and widespread, dispersed throughout the territory, and no longer concentrated within 4 walls and under one roof. The topology of this archipelago home, which allows us to be at home almost anywhere, must compose fragments of pieces of home scattered in space and time. The new family, the modern love, is a virus that transforms everything it touches into a home. Thank you. Good. Other questions? Was it clear? Yes.
Thank you firstly very much. It's all very interesting, fascinating. To maybe lead the students into a small discussion about home and house and the typology of architecture. To what extent, if we're redefining and we have the ability to redefine what family means in the 21st century, do we still have a connection between family and home, or family and house as a spatial element? Or has home, as you were saying with WhatsApp, home, I don't know, maybe my terminology is not correct, but the house being a spatial element which exists physically in the world, and home being that version of family which exists through connection.
Yeah.
Are we reaching a point, or do you think we're reaching a point where eventually these two will become completely detached, and actually home and therefore family exists in all of public space where production takes place, production of labour? And then the house exists as a version of the carriage for a car.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. This is an amazing question. I would say if it's happening, then architecture is over. So, I mean, because one possible definition of architecture is the idea that home and houses coincides. This is a good architect is someone who transforms a piece of space into the home of someone else, or his or her home. So, but to be more serious, I mean, I would say that, first of all, but this is my reading of what is happening in architecture today. More broadly, what is happening is the fact that space, which was recognized as the very object of architecture only in modern times. I mean, it was the invention of kind of contemporary architecture who recognized that space, the poor space, the geometric space is what architects are chiseling. This is modernism in a way. This is a possible definition. This is one definition which has been delivered of modernism. This is over. So that's why, in a way, it makes no sense to say that since family doesn't concern anymore with space, then house and homes are like divorcing. Because this is happening not just with family, this is happening with everything, with every aspect of our life. And this is why I said, actually, you should stop thinking that you are dealing just with space, because this is your object. I mean, this is the one of the objects you should design every single day, and the reason why those objects are so bad, the reason why those objects are politically also so ambiguous, is because architecture never took its responsibility in front of this, let's say, space. It's also called space. So why? Because architecture is also the way of an art, a discipline, to give structure, solid structure, to human relationship. I mean, relationship among humans and relationship between humans and the rest of the world. So that's why this is architecture, even if it's not made out of space or bricks or whatever. So, and more precisely, to go back to the domestic issue, I would say that the main problem would be how to really invent and design what I call this kind of archipelago domestic speciality. So it's how can we, because we need also a special, how can I say, visibility of this new domestic realm. It cannot be just, we know that it cannot be just a kind of signal, a digital signal that will lie all those persons in the world. We need to give to this, if we want those bonds to be a family, if we want that our, like the persons we are loving and we are living with, not in the sense we are living in the same, in a relationship juxtaposition, but we decided to spend time and spend time with someone else for like 20 years. Then we have to find the way to make those bonds, institutional bonds, visible in an objective way. So that's why this is your task, which implies, again, I repeat it, perhaps an invention of something which is not just a pattern on the ground, or a figure in the geometrical realm, which defines a redefinition of architecture. But this, I think, is not just coming from the revolution of families or of domestic architecture. This is coming also from urbanism, I mean, from urban thinking and planning. It would be very, very naive to think that cities today are just what's on the ground, no?
Because I mean, we're seeing also, obviously after COVID as well, there's this dilution of the home, as the work starts encroaching. We're leaving the density of work.
After COVID, there is what? I didn't hear the word.
There's a dilution of the domestic space.
Yeah.
What is working, and the same in terms of the density of work which happens in the city. We're seeing it kind of effectively become spread to suburbs, to houses, to housing, to domestic space, effectively rendering many shared spaces within the home obsolete, really, because the computer is set up.
But the COVID was also the experience of the obsolete character of our domestic space. During COVID, everybody realized that those spaces are really bad. I mean, not just in terms of there is a lack of space, but they are thought for a humanity which disappeared 2 centuries ago. So, and again, this is what I meant by the fact that I mean, I remember very well when I was a student, or the first time I read, I mean, I don't know, Delirious New York by Ryan Colas, or Kevin Lynch, The Image of the City. I was like, oh my God, people like that exist. This is amazing. So there were books which were important not just for architects, for just normal people or people who love thinking. There is not such a thing about domestic space. I mean, there is not such a thing like The Idea of the City by Rossi for the domestic space. It was a huge concentration of and attention to urban spaces, and it's easy to understand why. I mean, the urban space was so important last century, but now we have to shift this attention again to domestic space for several reasons. Is there any question?
So,
No, no.
I'll pass over.
Absolutely a marvelous opportunity for currently enrolled students. I have a question.
Yeah.
You had stated before how architects should be designing phones, the spaces like that. And,
Yeah.
how it shouldn't have been left to computer engineers and everything.
Yeah.
Do you think you would be able to, or do you have an idea of when architects changed from becoming like it being considered like an art form to like what it is more commercialized, I guess, or how you describe it today? Like, do you know when we had switched from being considered so like artistic to less, and like leaving things to computer engineers and stuff, and we don't have designing those things?
Thank you. This is also a very beautiful question. I don't think that the reason is what you call commercialization of architecture, or the fact that we somehow architects neglected their artistic destiny or aspirations. It's more the fact that because I mean architecture still today, I think it's considered by good architects and by good intellectuals as an art and not just as a technical kind of attitude. And we have amazing architects who are just artists, I mean, or not just artists, but they are artists in Europe. Think of Jean Nouvel, who are claiming that architecture is an art. Think of Jean Nouvel, for instance, here in France, just to make the example of who is claiming all the time, no, architecture is an art, it's not. But think of Wang Shu and Lu Wenyu in China, or I know there is a huge list. So I don't think that this people stop to realize that architecture is an art. I think it's more linked to the what happened to architectural discipline and teaching and theorizing when the first computers started to be used, or when the question of digital space were theorized. Something happened, but I cannot give you a precise answer. That, in a way, instead of seeing those objects at the very first beginning, think of Christopher Alexander. So at the very first moment, architects started to think of the digital space as a revolution within architecture, as a revolution of the object of architecture. There was a couple of architects who theorized that, but then it became just parametric architecture. It became just a way to draw in a more precise way. That's the reason. And also, even if you think of what happened, you had the postmoderns, the postmodern generations. Then you have this generation who started to think of these new tools. Think of, in France, for instance, François Roche. But this generation, in a way, it's not that they failed, but they didn't also produce, not because it was new, it was not their fault. And then what happened from an exterior point of view, it was that then came the new ecological or eco-sensitive generation, who is so much anti-technology and anti-modernity and anti-whatever is not a game with elements, that in a way impeded the emergence of a new discourse about the spaces. But on the one hand, on the other hand, perhaps it's also a question of education, in the sense that in order to get there, you would need a totally different education, which, the schools for architecture don't deliver or can't deliver. Because the other problem is that, for instance, if you want to become good in doing video games, which to my opinion is also a precise task of architects and not of computer scientists, but then you need a huge amount of money. And a school for architecture would never, ever have this amount of money. So that's why, in a way, it comes from from another branch of the industry. But I think, and that's why I'm repeating in an obsessive way, but I think it's time now to say, hey, there is a huge continent which belongs to what we have called in the past architecture, and which we are considering as something which has nothing to do with architecture. And this is what your generation has to do, to find a way to claim again this space or this kind of part of design. Also because, as I said, in a way, this is the instruments we are using in order to shape our relationship. It's not just an aesthetic concern. It's just, I mean, my way to be within my family is defined by that, much more than my apartment made out of bricks. But this is not that my apartment, this doesn't mean, to come back to your question, that my apartment is not my house. It means that my house is that, and perhaps something else. And that I need someone who put, for instance, that me, myself, simple citizen, I need that someone who is more intelligent than me, in a way, is able to put some homogeneity among those spaces. That's why I think you have a lot to do, and not to say, no, houses and homes are now divorced. No, it was not, just to encourage you to.
I'm
Yeah.
sort of fascinated by the technology discussion as maybe slightly selfishly as an architect who.
Can you come closer, because I'm a little bit.
As an architect who graduated and then became a video game designer before qualifying.
Oh.
Yeah, I did that immediately afterwards. But also a former student who is architect who now runs an AI company. We're kind of
beautiful, very good. Very good.
Between architecture and technology. I wondered if you could give advice to the new cohort of future architects. What would be your kind of distilled advice for them over their next 2 years as they study for masters?
So in general, it's difficult. I would love, and I don't know if I have the authority to give advices, and also I have too much advices, perhaps. No, I don't know if it's good to give advices, because it's always advices are made to be not followed. So it's, but I can give a couple of ideas which are more interesting than advices. First of all, it's that what is at stake, I think, in two ideas about those now, because you mentioned also AI, and there is something that has to be really re-established, because the public debate about AI, especially in Europe, also in US, is really so poor and so boring. I mean, because in a way, if you think about that, we are about to produce something which is the biggest form of intelligence that has ever been produced. And instead of saying, amazing, let's solve every problem we have, or let's in a way improve agriculture, or improve, which is also happening a little bit, we are like claiming that it's taking our jobs, which is ridiculous, because we are complaining all the time about the jobs. So in a way, the point, what I'm meaning is you have also, as actors in this field, to put the debate on a certain level and stop in a way, let the people in a way use this debate in order to produce sort of dark atmosphere where nobody understands anymore what is at stake. First, there was a very beautiful article that I read a couple of months ago about the difference, for instance, between the use of AI in US and in China. I mean, it was a rough simplification, but it's interesting. The idea that in US, AI is produced in order to have an app that allows you to make an avatar looking like Miyazaki cartoons, and in China is mainly used to improve agriculture because they are sort of remnant of a socialist idea. So that is what it's about. I mean, this is an instrument that can improve the life of huge collectivities. So and it's in your hands to drive so these instruments on the one side or on the other. So this is like a huge tool, and we have to stop to think that it's in a way, that it's producing horrors, because this is also a very naive idea of technology. I don't know if you ever but this could be another idea. What is technology? Because we are also polluted by a also very stupid debate about technology. We used to think that if I'm telling you what is the most advanced technological object you are using, everybody will be probably saying this or this. But this is wrong, because actually this idea that in order to measure the advancement of technology, you have to look at your relationship with metals and stones. It's not an evidence. It's just the result of what happened in archaeology in the 19th century. A British archaeologist in the 19th century was the first to suggest that this is the way how we can measure advancement in technology, because when you're looking at past cultures, stones and metals are the very first tools that humanity built. But there is a problem, that they are the first examples of technological objects just because tools made with organic matters are not resisting the time, the decomposition. So then, luckily enough, there were archaeologists who said, no, there is a huge missing mass in history of technology of tools produced with organic materials, which means that that probably the first technological objects were made out of branches or leaves of trees, which is a huge difference. Why? First of all, because probably it means that the first technological objects were not weapons, were garments. And it makes a huge difference to say that if you want to understand what is technology, you have to look at fashion, not at military science. Even in the gender balance, because for instance, a lot of archaeologists are now saying women had a huge impact in the development of technology for humanity at the very beginning, because of this idea that garments are the very first technological objects. It's a huge difference, because also if the first technological object is a garment, then the main goal of a technology is not the transformation and the domination of the outside environment. It's the spiritual transformation of yourself, because a garment is there in order to transform yourself and from a spiritual point of view, and not from. And this is the last